I was young, our family sat around a formica table. Maybe you had a formica table. My mother with her back to and closest to the kitchen. My brother across from her with his back to the windows. My father and I sparring off across from each other across the oval. Words chosen carefully. This guy, go ahead and go forward one. Maybe you had this. This is good Lutheran piety here. Go one forward, will you? One more forward. Not that guy. This guy. This guy presided over our table in prayer. I figured he was praying for us because we needed it. And we had rules at our house. Think about the rules at your house. When Mom rang the bell for dinner, you hurried to get inside to dinner. You washed your hands before you came to the table. You didn't put your elbows on the table. Our house was the rule was you had to try a little of everything even if you didn't know what it was. And you had to eat what you took. Clean your plate. Don't waste food. That's how you look like this. What kind of manners were you expected to have? What kind of table manners did you teach? Anybody got table manners? Did you teach table manners in your household? Nowadays, it's lucky that we have a table to sit down to at all. But in growing up, were you taught a certain type of table manners? This is like that Baptist moment of interaction. Way back in the back, Lori's got one. No elbows on the table. No singing at the table. This was not a Broadway show, Sue. Chew with your mouth closed. I think Marilee's in the back too. Okay, so don't eat until everybody's seated. And in some circles, that's wait until everybody's served something. Yeah, Jane had one. Napkin in the lap. Fred? No toys at the table. Were you used to bringing, mowers and things to the table? No stacking dishes when you take them off the table? Really? Okay, Alita. Cover your mouth if you're going to burp. In some families, burping was like a positive thing. In our family, it usually drew scowls. Yeah, Dixie? Parents serve first. The high and mighty serve first. What would Jesus say? Sue? If you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding, as Pink Floyd said. Yeah, okay. Charlie, wow, you got a lot of them. Say it again, Charlie, and I'll come to it. Okay, had to pray. That was a rule. Yeah. This guy was praying for us, so we didn't need that. Go ahead, Eileen. Family held back. Otherwise, it was survival of the fittest. Okay, all right. Jax, did you?
It was all about having something to discuss that was important at the table.
Oh, okay. So it was not just about eating food. It was about sitting down to a discussion. That there was a feast of ideas. Yeah, Chris.
Little etiquette, it was thumbs up, not like that. Holding your fork correctly.
Oh, you had to hold your utensils correctly. Okay, we were lucky to have utensils. Yeah, okay, Natalie? No answering the phone during dinner. In the old days when you could answer a phone, or now when you have them at the table. Yeah, what about the younger people? Do you have any phone etiquette, around cell phones that you guys have that aren't implied by your parents? You're too busy to come to the table. Oh, the phone, Mom said the phone doesn't come to the table. Okay, yeah. Well, you guys did good. Where did you receive some of the, if I keep this going, it'll be a very long message. So, this is back to the monologue portion. My apologies. You guys did awesome. Sometimes it's like, you got to get a can opener out here for these Lutherans. That was just, you did great. You did great. Some etiquette programs were conducted like in 4-H, If you were in 4-H, maybe you'd learn something. Others of you who grew up in a community of affluence like this one, maybe you had been in cotillion. Oh. Or maybe you had been a debutante. No? Any cotillion members here? We got a proud cotillion. Wow. All right, next dinner, you guys are in charge of the rest of us. It still exists. You can still attend a class in Westlake Village. I Googled it the other day, and I'm like, cotillion in Westlake. So that is neither an endorsement, not an endorsement. We didn't have debutantes in my hometown. There were a couple of divas and drama queens, but no debutantes in the crowd. We had military fathers, there you go, who trained us in a unique form of etiquette, that resulted in something usually kind of rough, but very formal. A meal that was rather fast. It accomplished the process of taking on nourishment. It was effective, but not usually very good for the digestion. One of our secret rules that we had between my brother and I was, you snooze, you lose. You snooze, you don't eat, is what that meant. Was the strongest survive. But those programs, the 4-H program, cotillion, military parents, were designed to give us some sense of table manners. And we're hearing a lot about table manners in our readings today. This little snippet of a proverb that we get that talks about table manners. And we see in the Gospels that Jesus is almost continually critiqued on his table manners by the religious leaders. Our Gospel today from Luke 14 is the third dinner invitation that Jesus accepts from a Pharisee. Luke 7 and Luke 11 are two other stories of dinners with Pharisees. At the dinner with the Pharisee and the lawyers in chapter 11, Jesus accuses them of neglecting the weightier matters of justice. And at the dinner with the Pharisees in chapter 7, this is the dinner when a woman from the city, whatever that means, comes in and weeping anoints Jesus' feet with this very costly ointment and cries on his feet and wipes them with her tears. Jesus accuses the Pharisees and lawyers of being hard-hearted, inhospitable in the face of the hospitality and mercy of God that was extended to them. And what I find fascinating about this reading, and I don't think I ever noticed it really before, is here Jesus dines with a pretty rough crowd. I mean, he's joining with rivals. Jesus accepts invitations from his rivals. Jesus attends meals to which he's been invited by his opponents. They're constantly at these meals critiquing him. He doesn't wash his hands right on the Sabbath. He heals on the Sabbath. He forgives and offers grace to someone who's unacceptable at all those meals. Make a mental note here. Jesus eats regularly with those who disagree strongly with him. And Jesus himself, invited to those meals by those who don't like him, offers at those meals his own invitation to see things differently. He offered them a way of reconciliation, a way of inclusion, a way of seeing and valuing the world the way that God sees and values the world. It was a kingdom way, we might say, or a kinship way, we might say. Kin, K-I-N, like family members. Kinship way in the family of God. Now, if you invite Jesus to lunch, and you can, I dine with him regularly, he is going to, at any occasion where you sit down to take in nourishment with him and from him, he's going to offer you an invitation. Be ready, because he's going to invite you to see things from a different point of view, and that might just blow your mind. Now, I grew up in a very small town with all the family around. I only have one family in this community. I only found him like 10 years ago. All my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, everybody was around. We all lived in this little country town, this little village. So we would all get together for meals on special occasions and holidays. Now, I already described our kitchen table, which was formica and sat kind of 4 people. So how would you get 40-some people in the closest portion of our family, those you'd actually celebrate these holidays with? How are you going to get those folks around a formica table that seats 4 people? Well, maybe your family, like my family, had one of those kinds of tables that did a miracle. We had the formica one, and then we had the wooden one. That was that had inserts. It was the coolest thing. My dad would tell my brother and I to get on either side of the table, right? And he would crawl underneath, and then you'd hear click, click, and he'd say, pull, and you'd pull the table apart, and you begin to pull, and this thing would separate from each other and had these like beam slats, and they'd just keep going. It'd be twice, thrice, 4 times the size of the original. It was amazing. And then you'd lay down planks like, railroad ties, on this thing. And then click, click, and it would just pull together as if it had always been one table. It was a miracle. My first encounter with the supernatural was a table that could expand. One of our church-wide leaders, his name's Stephen Bowman. He works in church-wide offices. He wrote a book, and in that book he tells this story about himself, about such a time of expansion for himself. He was a pastor at Atonement Lutheran Church in Queens, New York. It was a thriving, multicultural kind of congregation with many Anglo and many Korean members in it from the surrounding community. It turned out that Chang Lee, who was an 80-year-old member of the congregation, an old Korean man, had died tragically. His son was one of the leaders at Atonement. And at the funeral, he said that the casket was set up like a Shinto shrine. It had pictures of the deceased and flowers all over, and 2 posters in Korean ideograms. One poster gave biological information about Mr. Lee, and the other in Korean was the 23rd Psalm. Placed in Chang's hands was his old, tattered Korean language New Testament, giving quiet testimony to the faith that had been his companion through his lifelong journey from east to west, from life to death, and now into life. The service was marked by the customary and cultural politeness and form and respect and ancestral devotion. And afterwards, the 40-car motorcade sped its way down the crowded Long Island Expressway to the cemetery. And after the graveside committal service, each family bowed low before the casket in respect. Then he said something remarkable happened, something that Bowman had never seen before. The entire funeral party began walking from the grave, but not to their parked cars, no, over to a grove of trees that was nearby. And they began to spread out blankets, and they began to place food on those blankets, and they had a picnic. One of the family members came over to Pastor Bowman and smiled and handed him a part of a sandwich and a soft drink, and he said, "Eat and drink, Pastor. Enjoy. This is life, and life goes on." And so it did, he said. They ate and they drank among the tombstones of Pine Lawn Cemetery, celebrating life and hope in a place of the dead. In a graveyard, Mr. Lee's family set a table. I'm beginning to believe that this is the invitation that Jesus is giving to you and me as individual Christians and at church in the world now. In a world torn apart by division on every issue, torn apart by hatred and violence and intolerance and partisanship and anger, and I can't list them all, they just go on. And I believe that Jesus wants us to take a good long look at how he operates in a graveyard where Jesus' family is to set a table. Notice, again, that Jesus accepts the invitation of his enemies, and he welcomes the advances of those who are broken and unwelcome at that table. At the table of the Last Supper, the last night of his life, Jesus puts his body into the hands and mouths of one who will, just some hours later, deny he ever existed, and another who will within the hour betray him to death. Jesus offers a unilateral gift of love and mercy to the unworthy. He doesn't wait for them to get it all figured out. He doesn't wait for them to reciprocate. He doesn't require them to have doctrinal purity. No, Jesus offers condolence and forgiveness to the weeping woman at the table at the Pharisee's home. Jesus offers healing to an ill man, even though it's the Sabbath, to free him, chapter 17. Jesus offers instructions to the religious leaders, reminding them of God's concern from the very beginning for the neediest among us in the world. That's our gospel today. And we're here to receive again from him communion, not based upon your worthiness. That might be news to some of you, but based upon the unilateral gift of love from the hands and life of Jesus. Jesus sets a table, and Jesus has his own table manners in mind. You can read about them in the Bible. You can read about them in the Hebrews passage today. I think what we can take from this reading is that Jesus accepts those who come to him on their terms. You know, he accepts them. He accepted an invitation from the Pharisees. How many of you have sat down to eat with somebody from another political party or another church? Okay, yeah. This is the monologue part of the sermon, all right? I'm kidding. You could raise your hands anytime if you feel slain, if you want to answer a question. He accepts the invitation of the religious leaders. Now, think about this. These are the people who want him dead. And yet, he stays in dialogue with them, even as they surveil him, criticize him, and plot against him. This guy has a commitment to unconditionally loving those who disagree with him, those who are his enemies. He accepts the presence of the uninvited, the unwelcome, the unacceptable, those who don't belong. And in both, he accepts them on their terms, and yet he changes the terms, opening up possibilities through engagement with them in dialogue for forgiveness and for healing. And in fact, such a way of living is to provide the opportunity of healing even for his enemies. For much of the modern era of Christianity, we've required people to shape up if they wanted to come to church and encounter Christ in a place like this. And I think instead, we need to begin to look at setting a table in unexpected places for unexpected kind of people and accept the world on their terms in order that they may experience the transformative presence of Jesus. I can hear the but going on in here. It sounds like a small motor running. Next week, come back, because it is risky. Jesus will tell us outright, if you want to live with his table manners, it's going to be risky. Some of you in this room today have experienced the consequence of those risks of loving in a unilateral way. But for much of our history as church, we haven't wanted to expand the table. We like the formica. We like the establishment of mom there, dad here, and the kids on either side. We've restricted the table, and that's what's harmed us. And I think it's time for the church to set a table in the world in unexpected places for unexpected people so that Christ can transform the lost and the broken and the sinners and the righteous as he does. I would encourage us maybe to look at the world in terms of kinship, a model instead of rules or memberships. In our building, for example, what if we saw our 12-step groups as kin instead of renters? What if our next homeless meal, let's do this. Instead of just planning for 6 people to provide food, Marilee, next time, let's hold an all-church potluck at the shelter program. And not serve them, but to eat with them. Okay. Amen sufficient. No, I'm kidding. What if we changed the context? What if we became the unexpected answer to a world that believes the church is only going to answer in one way, which is right or wrong, or rules are in and out? What if instead we became the table in unexpected places? What if extending a welcome to a segment of the population that we have not welcomed? I know I'm messing now. Some of your minds are going over who that might be. What about the single mom who's struggling? Or the teenager that's acting out? transgendered person who doesn't really know where they belong, and certainly not in church? What if we set up a table in an unexpected place? They will never know that they are welcome to the life-changing power of God unless this church makes a unilateral move to welcome and invite. We accept the world on its terms, exactly as it is. As we sang earlier, that's what Jesus did. Come, just as you are, to worship. It doesn't mean in your Sunday best. That means precisely in the brokenness that you bear. But along the way, the equation gets changed. We change the terms, and it becomes about God's mercy and love. You see, Jesus was all about relationships. He lived into that the two big rules, the two great commands, to restore relationship with God and to restore relationship between other people. What if our mission was kinship too? What if it was to restore relationship with God and between us and other people? Think about the place where you have some brokenness in your relationships, the cycle that goes on of action and retribution, the action and retribution, or distancing and distancing and distancing that happens. Somebody needs to change the cycle, right? There needs to be some kind of intervention in that. Otherwise, the distancing and actions and reactions keep happening until somebody offers a unilateral. Unilateral means only in one direction, expecting nothing in return. It's hard stuff. Because Jesus said, freely you have received, so freely give. Let's get creative, beyond our self-justifying, but, going on in our minds in this room, going on in my mind right now. One of the learnings from the workshop I took this weekend on mediation is helpful, okay? What if we strove to be hard on issues and soft on people? Facebook's a great example. You put out a proposition and they're hard on people, right? I don't know. Chris, you get into this. I got a proposition, and man, I just watch people just hack away at Chris, What if we changed the terms? What if we became hard on issues but soft on people? Let's see if we can be Jesus to someone, because they don't really come to church that much anymore. So you need to be the church for them anymore. And then just watch as Jesus does some miraculous expanding of his love in you and in them. Maybe, as the words of our Hebrews lessons reminded us today, maybe you'll just find that you are entertaining angels unawares. If we are with Jesus, we need to mind his table manners. Amen.